My wedding day was turning a dream into a nightmare. Standing next to the altar, I saw my father, the man who had convinced my girlfriend to marry my brother years ago, whispering and laughing with her as if everything were perfectly normal. The looks of disdain and disbelief from my soon-to-be wife shattered my heart into pieces. In that moment, the truth hit me. She knew everything, and yet she was there, about to become my wife. My world collapsed in seconds, and what should have been a day of celebration turned into a cruel judgment of family betrayal. My name is Felipe. Love is a lie that everyone believes in. The background music of the party felt like a distant echo, almost irrelevant against the whirlwind of emotions consuming me. I glanced around, searching for support in familiar faces, but everyone seemed so absorbed in their own realities that I felt like an intruder at my own celebration. Samuel and Beatrice were holding hands, as if nothing had changed, while Clara shot me glances filled with anger and sadness. My heart ached as I realized the love I thought I had built was about to crumble. I averted my gaze to my mother, Ana, who was animatedly chatting with Jorge. She had no idea of the emotional storms about to break loose. What should have been a joyous day quickly turned into an emotional battlefield where secrets and resentments fought to emerge. Clara stepped back a little as if she needed space, and I followed her. I wanted to understand what had happened, why she hadn't told me about her past with Samuel and Beatrice. "Felipe, we need to talk," Clara said, her voice trembling, yet there was a firmness I hadn't heard before. She moved away from the group, leading me to a balcony that overlooked the backyard. The sky was clear, but the atmosphere was charged with electricity. The silence that settled between us was oppressive. There was no ignoring the chasm that had formed between us. I remembered when we first met. The instant connection, the feeling that I had finally found someone who understood me. Now it all felt like an illusion. "Why didn't you ever tell me about them?" I asked, trying to keep my calm. Her gaze was a mix of pain and guilt. "I was scared, Felipe, scared of how you would react. Samuel and Beatrice, they have a complicated past that I never thought would affect our lives," she said, almost in a whisper. The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The past she mentioned wasn't just a shadow, it was something materializing before me, a burden I hadn't known I needed to carry. "So you hid all of this from me? On our wedding day? During all those moments we shared? You were lying?" I asked, struggling to comprehend the depth of the betrayal. Her expression softened, and I realized that the pain I felt was just a reflection of what Clara was also grappling with. "I didn't want to lose you. What I felt for you was real. I thought that if I left the past behind, we could move forward," she replied. Her words sounded sincere, but the hurt was still fresh in my heart. The gentle evening breeze seemed to mock us, bringing a hint of hope amid the disillusionment. Clara stepped closer, as if trying to reach me through the pain. "Philippe, please don't let this destroy what we have. I love you." Those 3 words I had longed to hear now sounded fragile, as if a strong breath could shatter them. The love we felt was real, but the weight of the past was about to crush it. As she spoke, I couldn't help but let my mind drift back to the past. The first time I met Beatrice, the light she brought to family interactions, the way Samuel seemed so happy with her by his side. The betrayal wasn't just between Clara and Samuel. It was as if we were all entangled in a web of untold stories, each with a role and a hurt to bear. "What do I do with this now? How can I move on knowing you have a past with my brother?" I questioned, my voice trembling as I tried to process this new reality. She hesitated, looking down before meeting my gaze again. "You're the only person I want to be with. I know this is complicated, but we're family now. We'll face this together." Her words sounded like a promise, but the weight of distrust still lingered in the air. Could I really set the past aside and build a future with her? It was a decision that would require courage, something I wasn't sure I possessed at that moment. We returned to the party, but the atmosphere was irreparably changed. The smile that used to light up my face was now absent, as if I were wearing a mask. The looks from Jorge and Ana as we entered the room were curious yet concerned. They sensed the tension, making everything even harder. The music, which once celebrated life, now felt like a lament. Samuel and Beatrice continued to interact as if nothing was happening, and that made me uneasy. "Felipe, are you okay?" my mother asked, interrupting my thoughts. Her concern was evident, and I didn't know how to respond. "I'm just a little tired, Mom," I lied, forcing a smile. The truth was, my head was filled with unanswered questions, and my heart was still battling the pain of betrayal. What I really needed was time to process all of this, but the party continued, and everyone's expectations around me felt too heavy to bear. As I watched Clara interact with Beatriz, a new wave of anger washed over me. Why did I have to be the one to carry the weight of past decisions? It felt like my entire world was crumbling, and I felt powerless to change the course of history. What to do now? It was a dilemma that tormented me as the party went on, oblivious to the turmoil unfolding inside me. The music pulsed in the background, but to me, everything felt like a distant echo. The guests dancing and the smiles spread throughout the party seemed unreal, as if I were watching a movie where the plot had spiraled out of control. Clara's gaze was locked somewhere in the past, while Beatrice approached her, laughing at something only they understood. The tension in the air was palpable, and I wondered if anyone else sensed the storm brewing between us. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control, but my heart hammered loudly, as if warning me that something needed to be resolved. It was a game of emotional hide-and-seek, where secrets wove an invisible web around us. How could I have let things get to this point? The love I always felt for my wife now seemed shrouded in doubts and insecurities. What else didn't I know about Clara? And, more importantly, what had happened between her and Samuel that I had never perceived? My thoughts were interrupted when Anna approached, her worried look revealing that she felt the weight of the situation. "Felipe, are you okay?" she asked, as if she could read what I couldn't express in words. I forced a smile, trying to divert attention. "I'm just a little tired, Mom." But the truth was, the party wasn't tiring. It was suffocating. I desperately wanted the phone to ring or for something to happen to distract me from the reality unfolding before me. Aina glanced towards Clara and Beatrice, and I could see her concern growing. "Maybe it's good for you to talk to Clara. Things are strange, and we need to clarify this before it becomes a bigger problem." I knew she was right, but there was an invisible barrier preventing me from acting. What would I say to her? How could I piece together this emotional puzzle? Determined to face my fears, I sought Clara among the guests. She was now close to Samuel, laughing at something he had said. The smiles on their faces made me uneasy. The sight of my brother, whom I had always admired, alongside the woman I loved, was unbearable. What had happened between them during the years I had been wrapped up in my own life? The memory of how Clara had spoken about love and fidelity now felt like a cruel joke. "Clara!" I called, my voice sounding firmer than I felt. She turned, her smile faltering upon seeing me. "Can we talk for a moment?" Beatrice's gaze followed her, and I realized how quickly the dynamics shifted, as if the room had become a chessboard where every move counted. Samuel watched from a distance, his expression neutral, but his crafty eyes revealed a hidden interest in the conversation that was about to unfold. We stepped out to the patio, where the music was softer and the air was cooler. The silence between us was heavy, and each second dragged on. "What happened, Clara? What were you and Samuel talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but frustration seeped through. She hesitated, as if weighing her answers. "Felipe, it's not what you think. It's just friendship, something from the past." "Friendship? Or something more?" My voice rose, almost echoing in the empty space around us. The night was becoming a battlefield, and I was about to lose. Wondering if I could reclaim my love and trust that once seemed unbreakable. "I need to know the truth, Clara. This isn't just about you and Samuel. This involves our whole life together. She looked down, her eyes filled with pain. I never wanted you to know. Actually, Samuel and I had something when we were younger. It was confusing, and I didn't know he was with Beatrice. Her words hit me like a blow, and my mind began to spin, trying to grasp the complexity of the situation. It was as if a new weight had been added to a burden I was already carrying. You never told me about this. How can I trust you if you hid something so important? I was hurt, and the betrayal I felt wasn't just because of her connection with my brother, but because of the omission weighing on our union. I didn't want it to interfere with our relationship. I thought we could leave it behind. Leave it behind? How can we do that when the birthday party isn't just a celebration, but an emotional minefield? I looked at her, searching for an answer, a way to understand how all of this could be fixed. What do you really feel for Samuel? Are you still in love with him? The question slipped out, and her reaction was instantaneous, as if I had struck a raw nerve. No, Felipe, I don't feel anything for him anymore. I chose you, and I want you to know that. That phase of my life is behind me. Her voice trembled, but there was a sincerity I couldn't ignore. The tension between us was beginning to dissipate, although there was still much to resolve. As I looked into her eyes, I realized that the battle was far from over, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope of rebuilding what seemed lost. Could we face our ghosts together, or would this revelation be the final fracture that separated us? The future felt uncertain, but one thing was clear. We would have to confront the truth, not just about us, but about the complicated dynamic between Samuel, Beatrice, and the story that united us. If you enjoyed this story and want to know more about the challenges Felipe and Clara will face, subscribe to receive the next parts and don't miss the continuation of this emotional journey full of twists and turns. The tension in the room was palpable, as if the atmosphere itself was charged with the long-buried secrets. I looked at Clara, whose eyes gleamed with a mix of pain and confusion. The revelation about her past with Samuel and Beatrice hit her like a blow, and I felt that the happiness we once shared was crumbling before my eyes. The sound of laughter and happy conversations in the background of the party felt distant, as if the outside world was completely oblivious to the emotional turmoil unfolding within us. Samuel, on the other hand, seemed to have closed himself off in a cocoon of silence. His expression was a mix of discomfort and resignation, as if the truth had surfaced in a way he could never have predicted. Beatrice, who had always been so confident and self-assured, now seemed lost, trapped between the desire to defend her decision to be with Samuel and the sadness that her previous relationship with Clara evoked. Looking at them, I realized that each of us carried our own wounds, scars intertwining in ways we had never imagined. "Why didn't you ever tell me this, Clara?" I finally managed to ask, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. Her gaze shifted away, and I realized that the pain was not just about what had happened, but about the sense of betrayal hanging in the air. I felt the need to understand what was going on in her mind, but at the same time, the fear of discovering more truths that could hurt paralyzed me. "I didn't know how," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "It was something from the past, something I thought I had moved on from. When Samuel and I met again, it was as if nothing had changed, but I never wanted you to know. I didn't want it to affect what we had." Her words hit me like a wave, mixing love and pain into one feeling. She hadn't just hidden an aspect of her life, she had also concealed a piece of our relationship. "But this affects everything," I murmured, despair starting to seep into my words. "How can I trust you knowing there's something so deep between you? It's like I'm in a maze with no exit, and with every step I take, I just get more lost." The panic I had felt at the party began to transform into repressed anger. How could I have been so naive to think that everything was fine? Samuel finally decided to intervene. Philippe, I didn't know Clara was someone from your past. When I married Beatrice, I thought I was making the right choice. Life is full of surprises, and I had no idea this would come back to affect us. His eyes were filled with sincerity, but I couldn't help but feel that somehow he was still trying to justify himself. Beatrice, observing the interaction between us, decided to break the silence. I never wanted this to happen, Philippe. When Samuel and I started seeing each other, there was no intention to hurt you. Things just happened. Her voice was full of sadness, and I realized that she was also battling her own emotions. There was a sense of guilt lingering between us, like a dark cloud that didn't seem to dissipate. The laughter and music of the party continued, but now they were just distant echoes of something that once felt so joyful. The contrast between the celebration happening outside and the emotional storm surrounding us was almost unbearable. I looked at the faces of our friends and family, all oblivious to what was happening. The birthday that should have been a celebration of life and love was turning into an emotional battleground. We need to talk about this, I proposed, trying to impose some order on the confusion surrounding us. We need to resolve our feelings before this becomes even more complicated. Everyone agreed, but the weight of the words hung in the air, as if we all knew nothing would ever be the same again. We decided to go to the balcony, a space that had always been a refuge for us. Outside, the cool night breeze seemed to contrast with the heat building within us. The party lights twinkled like distant stars, but they were far from offering comfort. What was once our home now felt like an unfamiliar place, filled with doubts and uncertainties. Clara stepped forward, still appearing vulnerable. I love you, Felipe. That hasn't changed. But I need to understand how this can continue, how we can rise again after all of this. The sincerity in her voice made me hesitate. The pain and betrayal were present, but there was also love and the desire to move forward. I love you too, I replied, but my voice trembled with the insecurity that consumed me. But I don't know how to move on knowing what happened between you two. The dialogue was becoming a cycle of conflicting emotions, and the need for resolution felt even more distant. For a moment, I observed Samuel and Beatrice, who seemed as out of place as I did. Our stories intertwined in ways we had never imagined, and now we were forced to confront an uncertain future. It was clear that the conversation would not easily end, and each of us would need to face our own demons. But at the same time, there was a spark of hope that, by confronting these truths, we might find a way to heal, even if it was painful. The heavy atmosphere in the room seemed to suffocate us all. Words floated in the air, but no one dared to speak them. I looked at Clara, her face reflecting a mix of confusion and pain. She had always been the anchor of my life, but now, beside her, I felt a whirlwind of emotions I didn't know how to deal with. Samuel and Beatrice, however, were a constant reminder of the past I thought I had buried. What was about to be revealed could change everything. Felipe, we need to talk, Clara said, finally breaking the silence. Her voice trembled, and I realized she was as scared as I was. I was overcome with the desire to protect what we had built, but the truth seemed to be lurking, ready to strike. I looked at Samuel, who stepped back a little, as if he wanted to give space, but his eyes were still fixed on me, a mix of concern and regret. I never wanted this to happen, Samuel began, his voice low and tense. When I started dating Beatrice, I didn't know about your feelings for her. And believe me, I had no idea that her past with Clara was so deep. He hesitated, as if the words were stones in his throat. I wanted to scream, to question what he meant by that. How could he be so unconcerned about what had already happened? Do you think I'm an idiot, Samuel? I asked, anger beginning to take over me. How could you marry Beatrice knowing she was important to me? And now, Clara, the woman I love, is caught in the middle of all this. What were you thinking? With each word, my heart felt like it was breaking even more. As memories of moments I shared with Clara emerged, contrasting with the chaos surrounding us, Beatrice, who had remained silent until then, finally intervened. Felipe, I never wanted to hurt you. In fact, it was a mistake I regret to this day. Her gaze seemed sincere, but that didn't make it any easier to deal with what I was feeling. What I wanted was to have Clara by my side, away from all this confusion. The interactions between the four of us were a strange dance, where each step seemed to lead to an even deeper abyss. We have to clarify this once and for all, Clara said, her voice now more assertive. Felipe, I never wanted to hide anything from you. When I met Samuel and Beatrice, I was in a very different place in my life. What happened between us was confusing and unresolved. It wasn't a betrayal, but a consequence of a complicated past. She looked at me, seeking the understanding I was reluctant to offer. The weight of her words hit me hard, and I knew I couldn't simply ignore them. Samuel stepped forward, trying to mediate the tension. I didn't know about your past with Clara until things started getting serious between us, and it hurts me because I cared about you, about your happiness. I never wanted you to feel betrayed. The sincerity in his voice hit me, but frustration still bubbled inside me. I didn't know if I should believe him. Anna, who had been quiet until now, decided to intervene. Kids, I can't stay silent. Life puts us in difficult situations, and what we need is to be honest with one another. Felipe, you love Clara, right? So why don't you try to overcome this together? My mother's words were like a balm for my soul, a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, there was still hope for us. Samuel and Beatrice exchanged looks filled with hidden meanings, as if a storm was about to form between them. He seemed hesitant, but in a surge of impulse, he decided to speak. Felipe, I never wanted you to feel this way. I loved Beatrice, and you know it was a difficult decision. The sincerity in his voice made me feel a pang of compassion, but the memory of their moments together still hurt like an open wound. Beatrice, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. I really thought I had moved past that chapter, but when you and Clara got married, everything came flooding back. Her voice was soft, but the weight of her words reverberated in the room. Clara looked at me, her eyes filled with understanding and pain. Felipe, I also have a past I can't change. I never wanted this to cause problems between us. Samuel, you've always been important to me, but what I feel for you is different from what I feel for Felipe. The revelation hit me like a wave, and the room filled with murmurs and confused expressions. What was happening? It was as if the truth was revealing itself in layers, each more complex than the last. Jorge, who had been quiet until then, decided to intervene. This needs to be resolved. We are all involved and need to lay our cards on the table. Felipe, you should talk to Clara and Samuel about how you feel. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I looked at Clara, the love of my life, who now seemed so distant. Clara, I didn't know you had this history. It's hard for me to accept, but I want us to be truthful with each other. She nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I also didn't want you to find out like this. The truth is, before you, Samuel and I had something, but it was never as deep as what we've built together. The conversation seemed to spin in an endless cycle, but there was something healing about finally opening our hearts. Each of us seemed to be shedding layers of distrust and resentment. Samuel finally admitted, I married Beatrice because I thought it was the right thing to do, but what I was really doing was trying to forget what I felt for Clara. I never wanted to hurt you, Felipe. The guilt in his voice was undeniable, and for a moment, everything became clear to me. No one was exempt from flaws. Each of us had made mistakes. Anna, always the peacemaker, tried to bring the conversation back to what really mattered. What happened in the past we cannot change, but we can decide what to do moving forward. Felipe, you need to decide what you really want, and if Clara is willing, it's time to rebuild the trust between you. The mounting pressure made me feel like I was about to explode. I looked at Clara, wishing she was the only one I could talk to without the shadows of the past looming over us. Clara, do you still love me? Can that love survive all of this? The silence that followed was deafening. Beatrice and Samuel, realizing they needed to give space, stepped back, but their expressions showed that they were still grappling with the weight of the conversation. Clara looked into my eyes, and in that moment, everything became clear. Yes, I still love you. I have always loved you. What happened between me and Samuel was a youthful mistake and should never have interfered in our life together. There was a sincerity in her voice that touched my heart, and I realized that despite the painful revelations, the love we shared was still strong. The atmosphere in the room began to shift, and for a brief moment, I felt that we were all in some way healing. Maybe if we are patient and willing to talk, we can find a way to move forward, I suggested, feeling a glimmer of hope sprouting in my chest. Anna smiled, and I knew she had always been the anchor that kept our family together, even amid chaos. Samuel and Beatrice exchanged looks, and finally, she took the initiative. I would like to apologize to everyone. To you, Felipe, for messing with your heart. To you, Clara, for being a shadow over your happiness. We don't need to continue with this tension. We can build something new. The atmosphere in the room began to change, as if the weight of old grievances was being softened. I looked at Samuel and saw the determination in his gaze. I want all of us to be able to move forward, together. Let's overcome this as a family, he said. And the strength in his voice made me feel that, even with all the wounds, there was still a chance for repair. Time passed, and the conversation continued, unfolding in new directions. The bitter memories began to blend with promises of understanding and respect. As we shared our stories and feelings, I realized there was much more to gain by being truthful with one another. That birthday party, which started full of shadows, was transforming into a new beginning, and I couldn't help but believe that, in the end, love and family were stronger than any secret. If you've ever been in situations where the past returns unexpectedly, share your story. Together, we can learn to deal with the challenges life presents us. As the guests around me began to disperse, the atmosphere of the party became more tense. The music, which had once echoed with joy, now felt like a mere backdrop to whispered conversations and furtive glances. Clara, with her nervous smile, tried to maintain composure, but the unease in her eyes didn't go unnoticed. She stepped back a bit, seeking a more isolated corner of the room, and I followed her, eager to understand what was troubling her so much. "Philippe," she began, her voice low, "I don't know how to deal with this." The weight of her words resonated within me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that an abyss was forming between us. Samuel and Beatrice, they're not just people from the past, they're part of something I thought was buried. Sensing the urgency of the moment, I interrupted her. "I feel the same way. What's happening, Clara? What do you know about them that you haven't told me?" She hesitated, her expression mixing pain and confusion. "When I moved to this city, I thought I would leave everything behind. But Samuel, he was the first great love of my life, and I didn't know he and Beatrice were still involved when we started to get to know each other." Each of her words felt like a stab, and I found myself lost, wishing the ground would open beneath my feet. Memories of happy moments between Clara and me surfaced in my mind, but now they felt tainted by this new understanding. I tried to process what I had just heard, but the truth hit me like a strong wave. "You never told me anything," I demanded, frustration evident in my voice. She looked down, ashamed. "I wanted to, Felipe, I really did, but how would you react? How could I tell you that the man who was part of your family was such an important part of my past?" Meanwhile, Samuel and Beatrice exchanged significant glances in another part of the room, their smiles now carrying a new weight, as if they knew their decisions could further shake the foundation of our family. Anna and Jorge were chatting with other guests. but I noticed their furtive glances also directed at us. It was as if we were all caught in a board game, with each move potentially resulting in catastrophe. "I can't believe you kept this from me," I said, my voice filled with disbelief. "I thought we had a solid foundation of trust." Clara took a deep breath, her eyes brimming with tears. "And we do, Felipe. I just didn't know if I should share that burden. I thought I could be strong enough to handle it alone." Understanding her perspective made me feel a wave of empathy, but the pain of betrayal was still fresh. "We need to talk to Samuel and Beatrice," I said, determined. Clara hesitated, but nodded in agreement. The truth needed to come to light, and we couldn't allow these secrets to be the source of bitterness in our lives. We walked together toward them, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. The atmosphere was dense. There was a palpable expectation in the air. When I got close, Samuel and Beatrice stopped talking, as if Clara and I's presence interrupted a delicate moment. "We need to talk," I said bluntly. Samuel's expression closed off, but he nodded, visibly hesitant. We sat down at a secluded table, and soon the weight of the conversation became undeniable. "Clara and I discovered some things about you two," I began, looking at each of them. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Beatrice looked at Samuel, and he took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep, unknown waters. "Felipe, I didn't know Clara and you were so close," Samuel said, his words overflowing with sincerity. "I really didn't want this to become a problem." His words cut through the tension in the air, but at the same time, there was a fragility in his voice that made me reconsider the situation. Beatrice looked at me, her expression a mix of sadness and regret. "It was never my intention to hurt anyone," she affirmed, with a sincerity I couldn't ignore. "So, what do we do now?" I asked. My tone laced with desperation. Whatever was between them, or between Samuel and Clara, had to be resolved before it became a tumor in our family. Samuel looked at Beatrice, and in a silent gesture seemed to seek an answer, a solution that didn't yet exist. Clara, sensing the hesitation, took the initiative. "Maybe it's time for all of us to talk about what really happened, about what each of us feels and the mistakes of the past. We need honesty if we want to move forward." Her words acted like a light amidst the darkness, and I realized that although we were all tangled in a web of emotions, there was a chance to find a path to healing. What once seemed like a dead end now had a small opening, and although the future was uncertain, the desire to restore family harmony united us. It was a difficult but essential step. From that moment on, each of us would have to take responsibility for our choices and open our hearts to forgiveness if we wanted love to prevail over the wounds of the past.